From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode 503. I am Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. With me, my co-host Derek, Div3 in our forum, and Div3G and Div384 on X. Derek, good to be talking to you as always. What's new this week?
Have you ever heard of BlueStack?
I've not.
So BlueStack is an Android emulator, and I have an Android phone, and I am blown away at how well this emulator works. It has allowed me to play Hoopland by Quality Game, which we discussed on the last episode of the NLSC Podcast. And by the way, he is keen to come on to the show in December or January, so he'll be a great guest to have.
Absolutely.
But I was able to now play Hoopland on my 50-inch TV in 1080p at 60 FPS, and the game looks gorgeous. Even better, Andrew, it easily connected to my Xbox One wireless controller.
That's awesome.
So I was able to use like the on-screen button functionality as the in-game option, but map my controller effortlessly. It took 2 seconds. Map my Xbox One wireless controller to those on-screen buttons, and then just play it like I was playing on a console. It was fun. It was a blast. Like every game I played on that emulator was a blast.
So is it a case where you still log in with your Google account so that you can access all your apps and then just play it on PC?
Exactly. So that's
Fantastic.
what it does first.
Yeah. That's exactly
what it does first is you download the emulator, then you go into the Play Store like you normally would. You log into your Google account. You install the game. It looks like you're looking at your phone, but you're looking at it on your TV, right? You install the game, and then, boom, it works perfect. And I'm going to have to try this with NBA Live Mobile, because one of the reasons why I don't play NBA Live Mobile is because, as you and I stated prior, we're not really a fan of mobile games.
Yeah.
I'm more of a console gamer. I'm more of a PC gamer, more of somebody that wants to sit on his couch like we did when we were growing up and whatnot, put my feet up, have a video game controller, and hit the ground running playing that way. So, but yeah, this works amazing, and I'm going to have to try it with NBA Live Mobile.
I'll definitely have to check that out, yeah, because I do have an Android phone, and I also have NBA Jam mobile as well, still installed. That's no longer available in the Play Store, or iOS, unfortunately, but I do have it on my phone. I assume I can still download it through my account history, so no, I'd be interested to play the mobile version in a bit more of an accessible way. But that's really cool. And once again, Derek coming through with the recommendations for the emulators.
Yeah. So I want to enhance everybody's gaming experiences, right? And I feel like, there's a lot of avenues to game that some people may just not be thinking of, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe they don't know that. Maybe they don't know the app name. Maybe they don't know, where to get the product, etc. Now, I do have a question for you though. NBA Jam for Android. If that's not available on the Play Store, how would I be able to get that? Because now you have me intrigued.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to look into that. I don't think it's available still. I'll have to double check. It might be removed from one and not the other, but it is a stripped down version of NBA Jam 2010 basically. So it's more like NBA Jam 2010's gameplay than on Fire Edition and mobile to boot, obviously. But it's pretty solid. I did a review of it back in 2012, I think, when it came out, and I would recommend it again for mobile gaming enthusiasts. But again, with the emulator, then it's also kind of a PC release as well, or can be.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I want to have every single arcade basketball game ever made.
Right. Yeah.
Every arcade and every street basketball video game ever made, and I have the majority of them in my collection. We've talked about it before, but. Yeah, so we'll have to look into that.
I don't think I mentioned on the show, I mentioned a few weeks ago that I was waiting for my copy of NBA 2K12 Game of the Year edition to arrive, and it did. I was a bit disappointed, actually, because I opened it up and it was not quite in the good condition that the seller on eBay had said. The disc was quite grimy, actually. Some rather disgusting chunks on the disc, but I cleaned it, and it's working fine, so... all good at the end of the day. So, yeah, I'm able to play the Legends Showcase now.
There you go. And see, I know that you didn't get to spend enough time with 2K12 back in the day. right? I mean, you were playing those games a little bit more because NBA Live wasn't having an annual release at that point. They were on hiatus. But it's got to be refreshing to be able to go back, spend a little bit more time on these games now, kind of like a new, fresh, more accepting outlook, now that you're more of a fan of the 2K series, at least 2K17 and prior.
Agreed, absolutely. And I did spend some time with 2K12 playing through NBA's Greatest, completing all of those games, unlocking those teams, obviously. And it was actually my first foray into My Player, as it was called at the time. And I was intrigued by it. I did play about 5 games, funnily enough, with the 76ers, who I'm playing with in my 2K14, my career. That was my first foray into that mode. And I was intrigued by it, as I said. Didn't really get into the gameplay because still adjusting to not having a stick. 2K13 came along and remedied that problem, and what really got into my career that year, and the rest is history. But yeah, I did spend some time with 2K12, but not enough, and I'm quite keen to play it again, especially with this Legends Showcase. It's I mean, those players are already there in the game. Some of the players in that mode were not in the base game, but yeah, it's one of those things that I thought I'd missed out on because that's long gone from Xbox Live and PlayStation Store, but it's there on the Game of the Year edition disc. So yeah, if you can track a copy of that down, I would definitely recommend it. And shout out to Royce for letting me know about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know how we feel about the Legends.
Yeah.
That's some of our favorite content. What's great about that is that comic book style filter and just the uniqueness of that Legend Showcase. I remember looking at YouTube videos of that back in the day and just being floored at how cool that looked. So you're going to have to upload that gameplay.
Oh, absolutely will. I uploaded a short clip, a few of MJ's dunks from a 3-on-3 game. Put that up on our socials at the NLSC on X and Facebook, obviously, and NLSC Basketball on Instagram. Posted them all there. But yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into that mode, doing a proper Wayback Wednesday retrospective on it, and yeah, just enjoying playing something that I thought I'd never be able to play. But yeah, if you can get your hands on that Game of the Year edition, it is accessible right there on the disc. It's not a case of having to punch in a code. It didn't come with a code. It is there in the menu on the disc of that Game of the Year edition. So I would highly recommend it, and those copies are out there.
So is this like Andrew's deals, or do we call this an Andrew's advice? Andrew's advice sounds pretty good.
Andrew's advice, yeah.
And yeah, there's a new segment for the NLSC podcast. We got D's deals and Andrew's advice.
You know, like you say, we're trying to enhance the experience of our fellow basketball gamers.
There you go.
And speaking of enhancing the experience of one's fellow basketball gamers, shout out to WizCard Rush for releasing a 2009 season roster for NBA Live 10 for the PlayStation 3. This is a custom roster file that you can download, put on original hardware, or use with the emulator. That's the cool thing about custom rosters for the PS3 version of Live 10. You can create them on the original hardware on the PS3 or on the emulator, the RPCS3 emulator, and no matter which one you create them on, it will work on both. This is a detailed 2009 season roster, and it is in some ways a minimalist modding project, and I don't say that to downplay the amount of hours that went into that, all the hard work that went into creating that roster, but just doing something like rolling the rosters back a season and taking advantage of the NBA Live 10 gameplay with 2009 season rosters is the kind of thing we used to do. You know, it reminds me a lot of what we used to do with NBA Live 95 and 96 PC, when we couldn't do much with the art updates back in the day, Derek, but we could do things with the rosters, roll them back, add players, etc., and take advantage of the players in the game, use the default assets to create something new. And it's very easy to install. I've actually recorded some footage so I can do a bit of a tutorial for that. I do want to do a video on that project because it is really cool. You can also see a video of WizCard Rush and NBA Live Dude. Shout out to NBA Live Dude, always posting some very nice comments on our channel and chatting with us and the rest of the community on Discord. And he and WizCard Rush played a game that I believe produced a highlight in the top 10 this week.
Well, first I want to say shout out to WizCard Rush also for giving me the tip about BlueStack, the Android emulator.
Of course.
He mentioned to me on the Discord that that BlueStack works awesome. So that's what prompted me to install it. So NBA Live Dude and WizCard Rush played that game of NBA Live 10. I actually watched the YouTube video, and it was using that 0809 roster that WizCard Rush made. And there was a shot that didn't need to go up in the last second of the game, Wizcard Rush was already up by 2. He grabbed Iverson's miss. He was using the nets, and he flung a shot from basically full court, and it went in, splashed. The net exploded and whatnot. So while the shot was unnecessary, that's still an amazing shot. If you or I are at the gym and we throw a full court shot up and it goes in, nothing but net, we're going to be yelling about that,
yeah.
right? So even if it has no meaning whatsoever as far as like an outcome in a game or anything like that. So really cool ending to that game. I think that it may be a minimalist modding project, like you say, but even rolling a season back 1 year, so rolling a game back 1 year, so instead of, the 09-10 season, we're looking at the 08-09 season, there's still a lot of big changes that happen, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
For example, his is an opening night roster. So that Nuggets team that they put on the floor has Iverson on it because he started the season with the Nuggets and got traded to the Pistons a couple games in. So it's Iverson with Melo and J.R. Smith and whatnot. So that Nuggets team is that much more fun in the 08-09 season. And then Vince Carter, instead of being on the Orlando Magic, is on the Nets, right? So that's like, those are two big changes that were represented in that one game between Wizcard Rush and NBA Live Dude. And yes, big shout out to NBA Live Dude. He's been leaving a lot of nice comments on our YouTube channel. He's been, sparking a lot of conversation on the Discord. He's been incredibly active on Parsec. He's been connecting with a bunch of people in the community, and he just has fun with the games and, loves the classics like us. So yeah, really cool stuff.
It's what we love to see. And yeah, once again, bringing those different season rosters just a year ahead or a year behind into a game whose gameplay you really enjoy. And look, I do like Live 09, but Live 10 is definitely superior on the sticks. I don't think I'll get a lot of argument in that regard. So being able to just roll it back a year, and again, when I say minimalist modding, I don't mean to downplay the amount of time or effort that went into that, but it's just using the assets that are in the game. I think Katina Mobley might be the only player that has been created for that roster. I mean, obviously you can't have art updates on the PS3, at least original hardware. We have people working on that when it comes to the emulator. But again, I just love projects like that create something new, and it's not updating it for the modern day, it's not taking it back to the 70s or something crazy like that, or making all-time teams. All fantastic projects, of course, but there's just so much value in, like what I did with 2K10, Derek, just something that enhances that gaming experience, adding missing legends and adjusting some ratings, rolling it back a year or rolling it forward a year to take advantage of a game whose gameplay you really like, but would like different rosters with, adjacent rosters, if you will. Yeah, I'm just such a fan of it.
I mean, that's how we grew up with video games, right? With basketball video games, we had to be creative. Right, when we didn't have mods available, when there was limited editing options in the game, limited creative player slots, all of that stuff, we had to get super creative in order to continue to keep the experience fresh and fun and unique and whatnot. So no, I absolutely love projects like that, and I think the cool thing is this day and age, they can share it with the world. And I know it's an old game. I know it's not going to get a lot of downloads. But even if one person was to download that and it enhances their experience, that's a good feeling.
Absolutely.
Right? So you're going to have it. I'm going to have it. NBA Live Dude has already experienced it and whatnot. So right there, that's 3 people that he was able to positively impact their experience. And I actually wish more modders had that train of thought, right? Like that community train of thought, like the thought of, what, if I release this project, it's going to help others.
Exactly.
It's going to enhance others' experiences, and I don't care if I get credit, clout, etc. or not. And I think the biggest problem today one of the biggest problems with modding, outside of people charging for mods, is the fact that I feel like a lot of modding is done selfishly.
Agreed.
Do you agree?
Yeah, no, it's definitely changed that attitude in the community. I've seen it over 25 years plus, how that has changed, and it's been very unfortunate. And I know there are more avenues now to get your name out there and try to get clout, or indeed, as you say, charge for mods. But it's really damaged the hobby and the community.
It has. I think that a lot of people, in fact, the majority of the modding community now just wants either money for their mods or they want attention, right? Like they want to get it. They want to get attention. They want people to say how great their work is and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that portion of it, but you also got to have the community aspect in mind as well, and say, hey, I'm doing this for the community. I'm going to release this mod for free. I'm going to make it accessible, and everybody can have a good time with it. So I feel like that part is largely missing, from the modding community now.
It unfortunately is, but look, I'm not saying it's going to be easy to bring it back. I'm not saying it's going to be easy to spark a renaissance as far as modding the current games, or indeed going back and doing some retro modding. But we are seeing a few more people holding down the fort in that regard. You still got Pep doing great things with 2K14, releasing those mods for free on the NLSC, and with Wizcard Rush doing this for Live 10, and for both consoles and PC we can do these projects. And again, that is the great thing about minimalist projects, is that they will work on consoles where you can't do as much, or indeed anything with the art. So look, we'll always encourage it. We realize it's an uphill battle with the changes in attitude and the changes in the fact that you can monetize content more easily these days than we could in the early days of our community. But we will always stand for free mods and that community spirit. And it's great to see other people getting on board with that too.
Right, and look at Thunder Shack with 2K20, right?
Absolutely.
He releases all of those rosters, he puts in all that work, and he does it for free. And, the people that help him with those retro rosters, the people that make Cyberfaces, courts, jerseys, Dornas, all of that stuff, like, those people, are doing it for the community. They're doing it for that project that they know is being released for free. And the same thing with Ken, Stildo 33 with the 2K19 project. He's not making a cent off of that, right? I didn't make a cent off of my 2K17 mods or the 2K16 big roster that I released, and you don't make a cent off of yours. So, like, there's still people out there that are doing it the right way, and they have the right mindset when it comes to modding and releases, etc. Unfortunately, it's not as common as it used to be.
I do wish we had a few more veterans around from those old days to really set that example. Unfortunately, there was a big departure and shift in that attitude a few years back, and we are seeing the fallout from that now. But once again, we will always stand for that and push for the free mods and the community spirit. And I also want to mention I don't think I've mentioned it before, but if it bears mentioning again, obviously, that the 97 roster is also out now for the 2K19 Classic Seasons project.
Yeah, I saw that, and then I've also been talking with Stildo a little bit through text, and he did say that the 86 roster is almost ready for release. So 85, 86, all the way up to 96, 97. That's a lot of great seasons that the community can enjoy. And 2K19 is my favorite 2K after NBA 2K17. So we definitely spend a lot of time on that game, and I always install those rosters immediately on release. So good work from Stildo and team. And, we got to remember to bring up Sticky Fingers, too.
That's right,
Sticky Fingers does a lot of great Cyberface work. He never charges a cent for it. He does a lot of roster work. He has that NBA 2K16 09-10 roster that he's worked, put his blood, sweat, and tears into over the last couple of months and whatnot, and that's close to being released. In fact, he released a demo of it recently, and that's another community member that just does, mods for the love of modding and for the love of the community. And the reason why he would release that roster is just so people could, have a new experience with NBA 2K16, and he wants to make that roster as accessible as possible. So shout out to him for that.
It's a topic that we'll have to come back to in a future show. The nostalgia is now kind of shifting towards the late 2000s, early 2010s with those retro rosters and those games as well. It's been interesting to see. I mean, I'm always going to be interested in 80s and 90s rosters, obviously, or all-time teams and other Legends rosters and things of that nature. But we are seeing some more nostalgia for that time period, and I would be interested to see which season people are really interested in, or which seasons, I should say, people are really interested in seeing retro rosters for. I think that would be an interesting topic to circle back to. But in the meantime, shout out to all of those modders. Check out their work on the NLSC, and look out for that video on Wizcard Rush's roster as well. I'll have that up. If not, when this is out, certainly shortly afterwards.
Absolutely. You guys give us hope. You give us hope in the modding community, and you give us great mods to use, like I stated before, that are super accessible and for games that we love. So we appreciate it. And, that would be a great question to ask the community. Basically, what is your favorite NBA season of all time? And in turn, which games would you want that season to be modded into? So that would be a really good community question.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, emulator-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
But we have 3 community questions, Andrew. One from last week, related to modding, that I had to push to this week, and then 2 new community questions. So, we have to get into those.
So, the question you asked last week is very much related to what we were just talking about with modding, actually, in regards to 2K24 specifically.
Yeah, so I've seen very few mods released for this game, especially on the NLSC. And it is concerning because you remember how much activity that we had in the past, even when PS4 Gen 2Ks were in their infancy of modding, like all the people that were trying to mod NBA 2K16, the NBA 2K17, etc., and then all the mods that eventually got released for those games. And then obviously remember how popular modding was for 2K in the early 2010s. 2K14 was the boom, right? 2K14 was the real big one.
Absolutely.
It might be the most modded basketball video game of all time, but there were huge roster projects for NBA 2K13, NBA 2K14, etc. And then, we got up to NBA 2K20 and still pretty active. The modding community was pretty active in NBA 2K20. You had Thunder Shack's rosters, you had a 70s roster that was released for 2K20. You had a ton of cyber faces. People were trying to get creative with the courts, all of that stuff. Like 2K20, once again, pretty popular in the modding community. And then just over the last few years, it's just continued to die down more and more, to the point now where I can go into the NBA 2K24 modding section, and that game hasn't even been out for more than 2 months. It's been maybe a little bit over 2 months it's been out. And I can see an entire day with nobody posting in that section, right? That is concerning. Or there'll be a post in there and it will be like one release and it will be on one of the external Chinese sites.
Yes.
And whatnot. So like there's no big roster projects going on. There's no cool menu / AI projects going on. There's very few cyber faces being released. I'm not seeing anybody get creative, super creative really, with like new courts and all of that stuff. Like it just seems completely dead. The biggest reason why this is so concerning, in my opinion, is the game is still new, Andrew. Yeah. I know it feels like it's been out forever, but it's the beginning of November still, right? And this should be prime time for the modding community. So that's why I asked the community, what's with the lack of modding? What's the reason why you're not into it this year, why you're not, requesting mods, why you're not using mods, why you're not creating them, etc.
Well, not to spoil the responses before we get to them, but glancing at them and thinking back to what we've said about 2K24, I think there are some common reasons, not really feeling the game, not being able to do as much, being technically limited as far as the mods that we can create, and just being tied to the brand and the fact that it is old gen, obviously, that it still is that prior gen version. Seems to be a pretty common theme.
Yeah, I think the fatigue is real.
Oh yeah, definitely on PC.
I think the gameplay, the graphics, everything, people have just gotten bored of it. I think it's super boring to them. They don't want to create for it anymore. They're still disgusted with the company, with the fact that they didn't get, a next gen version of the game. Meanwhile, like for example, Madden went next gen on PC this year, etc. So like, it feels like I think the PC community still feels slighted, right? And I think that factors into it. But I just think there also hasn't been enough improvements or any improvement for a lot of people to the gameplay to make them even want to turn on the game and get their hands on the sticks. And we've talked about it before that, it's hard to mod a game that you don't love or that you don't like, right? It's hard to want to install mods for a game that you're not that big of a fan of. And I think that the gameplay on PC, and we've talked about it before, it's questionable if there's any improvement at all from NBA 2K23. So there's been a lot of people sticking with NBA 2K23 and not even getting NBA 2K24 for the PC. And I think it was Sticky Fingers that posted the online Steam numbers one day. It was like, who's online for NBA 2K24. The population was incredibly small, Andrew.
Yeah.
There were not many people playing the PC version of the game. So that also contributes to the fact that, we're not getting that many mods.
Well, turning it over to the community now, TG So Good says the game isn't worth spending another $60 US to purchase. And that speaks to, I think, the attitude that a lot of people have, that they don't feel the game is worth it. So if we don't want to play it, we don't want to mod it or use mods.
And that was the most liked response. And I think that that's the way a lot of people feel, is it's the game's just kind of gotten stale. And why would they feel compelled to spend another $60 on the PC version if they're already getting the PS5 Series X version? And if they're not fond of the direction of the company in this series, will they get it at all, right? On any console or on PC, etc. So no, I agree with him 100%. There's a lot of people out there who just think it's a complete waste of money to pick up the PC version.
I mean, if it was half price or 2/3 of the price, I think people might take the chance simply to have those new rosters and something new to work with. But full price for a digital-only release that is the PC version that's still old gen, when the PC version, when gaming PCs are capable of so much more, yeah, a $60 price tag is a turn-off for a lot of people at this point.
Yeah, I honestly, for those people, I would wait and get it when it's like 75% off.
Yeah.
It ends up happening.
It always does, yeah.
Right? We've seen it go
Black
down
Friday's
to,
coming up. That's usually the time.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it go down to, $15?
Yeah, or less.
Something like that. Yeah, or less sometimes. So for those people, maybe that's when you pick it up. And you know what? If you're not a fan of the series, or you're bugged by the microtransaction BS, and you don't like the direction, maybe you don't want to support the company, don't pick it up at all, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, that's completely up to the consumer, but I understand where people are coming from.
And to that point of it being old gen and paying the same price for a game that is outdated, It's Niners season says they're tired of being on old gen. Lagoa says, for me as a modder, it's old gen plus time. Dimity Childry at EA Sports Ideas says this is why they haven't released next gen. Allow them to be makers and enjoy the game for what it is. Kevin T says on PC, 2K23 still the best option. 2K24 is just an update without upgrade of quality. It's All Good says it's got to be old gen, right? Playing current gen / next gen, it's very obvious that all the effort has gone into it. Miguel says 2K24 on the PC is just a glorified roster update. Then they added De Novo on top of it. Depending on the setup, can affect gameplay performance. You could put 23 side by side with 24, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So again, it comes down to people feeling that 2K23 is just as good. 2K24, not as much of an upgrade for the price. But yeah, old gen, prior gen, whatever you want to call it, or indeed current gen, as they're still as 2K themselves. That's the nomenclature that they're using. New gen and current gen. Either way, the PC is not getting the PS5, Xbox Series X version, and that's turning people away.
People want inspiring gameplay, Andrew. They want gameplay that they look forward to, right? Like they want to be able to put on the game, whether it be online, offline, etc., and to be able to have a unique experience and a fun one. And I just think there's too many gameplay frustrations. I think there's too many legacy issues. This new motion system has its own plethora, Andrew, of legacy issues now that you can trace back to NBA 2K18, and more specifically, actually 2K20, but some of them do go back to 2K18. So now there's these people, let's say the young crowd too, let's say teenagers and whatnot, the 2Ks that they grew up with all have the same, like have a lot of the same issues that they've had for the last like 6 years, right? It gets old. It just gets old putting on the game, and you feel the skating, and you feel the suction, and you're like frustrated with the shooting. You don't know what type of shooting you're going to get game in and game out. It's the press steal to foul. It's just like, it gets old. Like, and you can't tell me that you put on 2K24, Andrew, and felt like a super fresh experience.
I can tell you that, but I'll be lying through my teeth.
Right, exactly, right? Like you can't tell me that you put on that game and were like, I'm having an absolute blast. So like, I think that it really comes down to the enjoyment of the game, because even if the graphics didn't change much, maybe they didn't change at all, but the gameplay was fun on the sticks, I think you'd just see a lot more people praising it, right? Because then the shooting would feel better, there would be better foot planning, the dribbling would have less ball warping, there'd be less suction. You would have people saying, you know what? Sure, there wasn't a jump in graphics, but hey, I'm having a blast with this game. And then I think more modders would also jump on it as a result.
Agreed. I do want to circle back to something that Lagoa said when he mentioned time, but before we get to that, a couple other comments on the technicalities of modding. Hookup Guy says, we are limited on what we can mod and how we mod. We have been spoiled, and there is not much we are missing out with 24. Dr. Toboggan, MD, says, they included a mods folder of their own this year that is years behind what we are accustomed to. More detailed mods that we got used to the last few years are now less accessible, so something like career packs or new hairstyles is not possible, / not worth the time to make work. And that is the sad reality, is that we don't have all of the tools this year, all of the roster editing tools to make some of the detailed mods as in years past. And that mods folder, although it's an overdue addition, as Dr. Toboggan says, doesn't have all the same functionality that the Hook did unofficially. And the other thing that Lagoa says, of course, is time. And a lot of people have been around the community for many years, and other responsibilities get in the way, and you don't always have the time, or you may just be burned out on the hobby.
So about Dr. Toboggan, he's one of the best cyberface makers I've ever seen. So I don't know if he listens to the show, but shout out to you. You make a lot of amazing cyberfaces. I've been keeping an eye on his work over the last couple of years, and his stuff just blows me away. In relation to time, we've talked about that on prior NLSC podcasts. Yeah, I mean, people grow up, people end up having more responsibility. Sometimes finances get in the way as far as, being able to purchase the game. And I think that, sometimes interest gets lost too, in general, in video games, right? That's just the reality of the situation. I know some people that, I grew up with that never play video games anymore. They don't enjoy it. It doesn't feel the same for them anymore to get their hands on the sticks. I feel lucky that I've been able to keep that as a hobby, and be able to enjoy it as much as I did when I was a kid. And I get to share that experience with my two brothers, right? And I get to share that experience with my girlfriend and you and people I connect with on Parsec. So I can still share that experience with other basketball gamers, and I love that fact. But yeah, sometimes people fall out of love with video games.
They absolutely do. And if not gaming, then certainly modding, because that can be a more time-consuming and an arduous hobby.
Oh, absolutely. Like I've said before, so I made a bunch of cyberfaces. I made Walter McCarty, I made The Mask, I made Hellboy, I dabbled in some, fun projects and whatnot. I made Mark Blount, etc. Certain cyberfaces, one cyberface can be a multi-day project, right? Hours a day for multiple days. You're lucky if you get a cyberface done and that looks good in, say, 3 hours, right? So it is incredibly time consuming. And for these people who make custom courts and everything, doing the baseline, designing the center logo, making things colored the way that you want them to be, etc. Like, that is super time consuming, whether you're doing it in paint.net, Photoshop, whether you're, doing stuff in Blender in relation to stadium work, all of it is ridiculously time consuming. So yeah, it's tough to find time.
So a few more responses on X now. Batdog says, besides 2K24 is a crap game, or poop emoji game. We know what he's saying there. Modders stick on playing 2K23 instead. Ed says, the lack of next, or rather current gen for PC has caused me to stop purchasing the PC version at all. Mahmood, modder of course, says, 4 reasons. Old gen, stagnant game, lack of modding tools and support, and Nouveau. Stone Cold Steve says, I don't have PC, but most complaints I see is no next gen. Ken Britt says they're getting hired, and Vin, in my opinion, it has to be because it's an old gen release.
So Ken brought up a point about them getting hired, and obviously we have seen members of the NLSC community get hired by 2K. We've had Razor, who makes faces for them now, and he has for the last few years. Zhao Sming, John, Leftos, Vlad. I don't know of anybody else in the NLSC community out of those names that have been hired by the company, but I wouldn't be surprised if they hired some of the prominent cyberface makers, right? And we just didn't hear about it. However, I don't think that is the reason why we're seeing a downtick in mods. I don't think that's a reason at all, because if they are taking anybody else from the modding community that we haven't heard of, it would probably only be a couple people, right?
Yeah.
So that's not going to make up that big of a difference, because we were seeing mods coming from everywhere, all the way around the world. So many different people making big projects, making different types of mods, etc.
And actually, one more from X before we jump over to our Discord and Facebook. Shady Mike, of course, says, I told my entire community I wouldn't be buying 2K24 on PC and that they shouldn't either, and I hope they listened. And so he's boycotting the game, and again, other people are as well.
Yeah. Apparently, multiple people, liked his post and reposted it, etc. So those people might have been those people, right? The people that were in agreement and that they refused to purchase the game. And I don't think that's a good look for the company, right? There's some outspoken people in the 2K community or the basketball gaming community in general right now. And that word of mouth, Andrew, it makes a big difference, right? It can hurt a company's bottom line. Will it hurt 2K's bottom line? Probably not. But, it can hurt.
And jumping over to the Facebook page now, Jan says they stick to 2K14 modding. Gilbert also says NBA 2K14, as you say, one of the most modded games ever, and still has an active modding scene.
Great gameplay.
Absolutely.
Andrew.
Yeah.
Its PC version of NBA 2K14 has, in my opinion, timeless gameplay. That's how solid it is.
Jason says, coming from 2K23, it's a dumbass move to buy 2K24 in PC, stick to your past 2K games, and mod it, which again is what people are doing, and we absolutely support that.
He called us dumb, but I understand where he's coming from. So I got the PC version, obviously, because we collect.
Yeah.
Right? And we use those assets at times and whatnot for other games, for mods, and et cetera. So I may be dumb, but I am a collector.
Yeah, I'm a dumb collector too. But I'm very open about that. Look how many copies of 2K12 I have now, Derek, with the Game of the Year edition. I think it's up to 9.
And this isn't it either.
Yeah,
by the way. If Andrew sees it for a few bucks somewhere, even if it's a cover he already has, he's probably going to grab it. Well, by the way, that's how insane I am too. I'll go into our local Bull Moose, which is that's the name of it. It's a music store / video game store. And if I see a game that I already have, say NBA 2K13 for Xbox 360, and I see it just only for a few bucks, I'm going to buy it again.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't help it.
I've been very tempted to buy extra copies of Live 96 PC because they have a different disc, the actual CD-ROM has different disc art than what I have. That's how crazy I've been with considering it. And I don't have the Game of the Year edition for Xbox 360 yet, so if I see that at an affordable price, then that's got to be in the collection too. But
I'm the type of guy that kept the duplicates when you open card packs, right? Like in real life, when you opened up a big box of Skybox, and you'd get 3 David Robinsons or something like that. It's all right, well, all 3 of these David Robinsons are going in the binder right now, and I am going to keep them for the rest of my life. That's the way I look at it.
Imagine opening a pack of cards and getting good things. Pay attention, my team. Anyway.
Yeah, or it could be right, exactly. Or it could be 2K23 where I get like 8 Kazi Russells.
Oh yeah, in a row.
And
yeah.
I don't even want to play one Kazi Russell, to be honest with you, but they gave me 8. So
there have been times when I've opened a pre-order pack, got a double of something I've already had, opened the next pre-order pack, and got that exact same double once again, 2 or 3 times in a row. It's absolutely ridiculous, especially when you still have thousands of cards not in the collection. But topic for another time. Jacqueline, Lady Culture, says no one wants to mod every year from scratch for the same recycled game over and over. So yeah, you've got both the stagnant game there, and also, we have to create. We've spent all this time creating this great mod for Game X, and then Game Y comes out, and we've got to create everything all over again. Some people don't want to do that.
That's why I'm so excited to see people still stick with like 2K14 and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And still do stick with 2K19 and Thundershack stick with 2K20 and Sticky Fingers modding 2K16. Why? Because, and Peaceman not doing his 2K11 project, right? His enhanced 2K11 mod.
Oh, there's very cool stuff happening there, yeah.
Yeah, because these people get the big picture. They see it. They're like, you know what? This game was great. We still think it's great. We want to stick with this game, so we're going to keep building. And I think that that's just better for everybody when there's people like that in the community.
And jumping over to the Discord, Pep says, I guess there are 2 reasons. One, it's still an old gen on PC. Second, 2K pushes the game more into microtransactions and my team, which decreases popularity of mods. And Maz, she says, yeah, PC not being the next gen version really hurts it. Imagine if my NBA eras could be modded, people would have a field day. And again, it comes down to having that old-gen version, that current-gen, prior-gen, whatever you want to call it, not the flagship version on PC. And also that push towards microtransactions and having to always be online, and people getting banned for roster modding, which is funny because they don't get banned for cheating online, which is what the bans are actually supposed to be. Those anti-cheat measures are supposed to catch those and not the roster modding. So yeah, a lot of people are pointing out the same issues. And yeah, those are the big reasons for sure.
That's a great point by Maz. She brought up the whole point about if the game was fresh, right? So if my NBA eras was in 2K24 PC, it would have given fresh content for people to sink their teeth into in relation to modding, right? And I think that a good example of how that worked with NBA 2K23 is, you notice how on the PC version of 2K23 they had the Jordan Challenge, right? Hokup Guy created a ton of mods for that challenge mode. He enhanced it. He made it look more realistic. He added scoreboards to it, presentation elements, etc. So that's because he had something new to sink his teeth into, right? And he didn't hate the gameplay. So that is a strong point by Maz.
And look, we'll have to see if things change after Black Friday and some other sales. People do pick up the game. They give in to temptation and pick it up for $5 or $10 or whatever they feel it's worth if it goes on sale like that, and if people do get into the modding. But again, people just aren't feeling the game this year. So it comes down to that enthusiasm for the game. People aren't feeling it, so they're not modding it.
Yeah. You know what? I had a random thought. This is going to be the most random part of the NLSC podcast, Andrew, maybe ever. Do you think NBA Live Dude and NBA Live Girl know each other? Because remember, NBA Live Girl is a part of the Discord. I've connected with her on Parsec, etc. And now we have NBA Live Dude who joined the Discord. Do you think they know each other?
I think they've got something in common. But yeah,
I feel like we should introduce them.
Absolutely, yeah. Are we starting a matchmaking service now?
No, that's not. No. But maybe they could connect on Parsec and play some video games. Maybe play some NBA Live together, and that would be fun.
Absolutely. But as you said, Derek, we have a couple of other community questions this week and some other great responses. And this is an intriguing question that you brought up this week about owning one console for the rest of your life.
Yeah, so my question for the community is, if you could own only one console for the rest of your life and the entire library of games that came with it, what console would that be? And the bonus aspect of this is the console that you choose will have the newest 2Ks also created for it. And we did get some responses.
So first of all, we have Stilda33 says, does PC count? That's the one to own. Mods make a game totally different experience, endless possibilities. And I was going to bring up the PC as kind of a tongue-in-cheek response when I saw you post that question. So he stole my thunder on that one. But yeah, I mean, some people would indeed opt for PC over a console.
Yeah, and I said my response to him was absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can consider PC as your choice. So, but if you did that, you wouldn't be able to own any consoles. However, I didn't say emulators weren't allowed, right? So if you're on PC and that's the only, video game system you have for the rest of your life, you can get Super NES, Sega Genesis, Sega CD.
He found the loophole. He found the loophole in your question.
N64, he found the loophole. So I think Stildo, if this was a competition, probably would have won here. But he did follow up that answer by saying that if you had to choose a console, it would be PS3 gen. So it'd be like PS3, Xbox 360. I don't have the post right in front of me, but I believe he said his reasoning was because he thought that's when the games, started becoming elite.
Yeah, he says probably Xbox 360, only because I feel that's when basketball games were at their peak, 2K11/2K14, college basketball games, etc. And yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia for that 7th generation, and that was a very solid generation for gaming in general. Yes, it was that time when DLC and microtransactions were starting to become a thing, but hadn't completely taken over yet. And I think that's something, in fact, I know that's something that people really miss, and that's a big driving force in the nostalgia. Although, having said that, the quality of the games is also top-notch as well.
Yeah, I think I agree with Stildo, though. I think that my choice would also be PS3, Xbox 360 gen. Just the countless hours I could sink into the modes that were integrated into a lot of those games. The arcade games that did come out for those consoles, like, NBA Jam on Fire Edition, etc. We had the unbelievably deep, fun gameplay of games like NBA 2K13, 2K12, 2K11, 2K14. We had NBA Live 10 on that gen. Sure, it wasn't the greatest gen for NBA Live games, but hey, at least we had NBA Live 10, Andrew.
Yeah.
But I think that's when the gameplay really started getting deep in basketball video games, and I think the gameplay was just so solid on so many different titles. And I would love to see new 2Ks on those motion systems, right? Like on that 2K13 motion system with those graphics and whatnot. I would love to play those games. So I think my choice would also be PS3, Xbox 360 gen.
I'm tempted to say PS4 simply because of the full HD and the internal recording capture. Well, of course, using Elgato, you get the 60 frames per second, so you can use that on older consoles as well, obviously. But as far as the quality of the games and the breadth of games, the variety of games, it is hard to go past those older consoles, those older generations. And to that point, Cortez says, PS2, I'm actually getting into some emulation now, and the classics on there are insane, from Street Series to Live to 2K to hidden gems like NBA Hoops, and I know you like that one.
Ugh. See, that's the thing. I say PS3, Xbox 360, and then I remember how many great titles were released for PS2.
Right, yeah.
What a great console. And so many different arcade basketball games and street hoops games. And just, there were a lot more players in the basketball video game space, so you had more options, etc. I don't know. Like, it's tough for me to answer this question because I would be probably perfectly happy with PS2 as well. And then, like you said, PS4 has some of our favorite basketball video games like NBA 2K16, NBA 2K17. We both like 2K15. I enjoy 2K19 now, etc. So, yeah, I'm stuck with this answer actually between PS2, PS3, and PS4 gen. I don't know.
And to that point, Bucky T says, if we're talking variety, I'm most definitely going with PS2. They had so many hoop titles, but I always have a soft spot for the original Xbox, PS1, Dreamcast, and Xbox 360. And of course, the PS2 could play PS1 games as well, so we can still play our NBA in the Zone 2.
I think the two most underrated consoles in video game history are Sega Dreamcast and Nintendo GameCube. The graphics on those systems, the games that came out on those systems, I wish those consoles had lasted longer. I wish more games were made for them. The Dreamcast died way too fast of a death for the quality that was in that console. I love the Dreamcast and I love the GameCube.
And heading over to the Facebook page now, Kieran says, has to be PC for the ability to mod and the amount of info you can have on one screen. Also, being closer to the screen feels more immersive. And of course, you're playing with your PC attached to your big screen TV, so that's less of an issue. But for someone like myself, I like him have it connected to a traditional gaming monitor, so that I understand where he's coming from there. And Alejandro also says PC. I started with NBA Live 98 and spent hours reading the side notes on the main screen and the team data.
I encourage people to try the setup that I have, where you have your gaming tower or mini PC, which you've talked about before. Sometimes those are viable gaming options. But let's say you have your PC tower on a stand and whatnot, and just have it sitting next to a big screen TV. 50-inch, 40-inch, 60-inch, maybe 70-inch, Andrew, 70, 75-inch. I got to try that at some point. But have it hooked up via HDMI to your TV, and you will be blown away at how good it looks and how awesome it is functionality-wise. We have it set up in our living room that way, and it's hooked up to a 50-inch TV. We sit on a couch with our Xbox One wireless controllers because we have a USB adapter plugged in that makes it wireless. And we play all of our PC games, all of our ROMs, all of our emulators, the old NBA Lives, BlueStack, the Android emulator, all of that stuff right from our couch. And it is awesome. We're never going to want to game a different way anymore, Andrew. We do still console game and whatnot, but for PC gaming, this is it.
Absolutely.
And I definitely encourage people to try that setup because it is awesome.
And heading over to the Discord for a couple more responses here. Juicy Shack Meat says, PS3 for me. Its generation produced the best basketball games such as NBA 2K11, NBA Live 10, and NBA Jam on Fire Edition. And Perdido says, I'd say Xbox 360. Most of my favorite 2K games are from that generation. So basically the 7th generation for both of them.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that. I think that a lot of the PS3 games and Xbox 360 games still look amazing today in comparison to PS5 graphics. Go back and look at Skyrim, right? What a beautiful game. Look at a game like Dragon's Dogma. Look at some of the first-person shooters that came out for those consoles and whatnot. Because we're not just talking about basketball games here. You have the entire library of games for those consoles. And just some of the PS3 and Xbox 360 games still blow me away from a visual perspective.
Now, once again, I'm not surprised to see some common answers there, and there is a lot of nostalgia, as I said, around that PS3, 360 generation, the 7th generation of consoles. It was before all of the monetization. There's a lot of great games coming out on those systems, and yeah, I absolutely share that nostalgia.
It's weird, Andrew. I could probably live the rest of my life still having fun with the 16-bit era. With Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, if they said, listen, you can only have 16-bit games moving forward, because I could still have fun, right? With NBA Jam, right? With College Slam, with Dick Vitale's awesome baby college basketball, with NCAA basketball, with Tecmo Super NBA basketball. Like the list, with NBA Live 96, Live 95, there's still a ton of basketball games back then, right? So if somebody said, oh, Derek, you're going to get stuck with the 16-bit era for the rest of your life, I'd be like, all right, well, I'm going to start a season on a bunch of these different games, right? And I'm going to go back to using my imagination more, and I'm going to relive some of the players that I loved watching growing up and loved going back and watching highlights on YouTube, etc. So, I could make a 16-bit, I could have the rest of my life in 16-bit and still be fine, I think.
Absolutely. That's what we grew up with. A lot of nostalgia there. Once again, a lot of great games there. And to your earlier point, not just basketball games, obviously, but 16-bit era, we've also got the Donkey Kong Country trilogy.
Exactly. And you got, Contra 3 Alien Wars, right? For Super Nintendo, there's, a bunch of good, fun, deep games that came out in the 16-bit era. How many games came out for Super NES? I think it was, around 900 or 1,000?
Yeah, something like
that. Yeah, that's plenty of entertainment right there.
It's kind of interesting in that regard because Nintendo 64 was a bit of a downgrade as far as the amount of titles, and although there were some landmark releases on that system, and I do actually have nostalgia for the N64, but there are a lot of games that didn't age very well, and yeah, not a lot of games, not as many games, I should say, that came out for the system compared to the 8-bit era or the 16-bit era.
So you remember how great Earthworm Jim was on 16-bit consoles, on Sega Genesis, on Super Nintendo? That original Earthworm Jim is, in my opinion, one of the best side-scrollers of all time. I love it. I beat it multiple times. The N64 version of Earthworm Jim is one of the worst video games I've ever played.
Yeah.
They did such a disservice to games like that, and then I think there was also Castlevania was really poor on N64, but then also great in the 16-bit era. Like, N64 actually kind of butchered some legendary classics.
Trying to get a 3D killed a lot of games that worked a lot better in 2D. Absolutely.
Yeah, they didn't butcher Mario Kart, though. Mario Kart 64 is a very good game. So I can't say that. And F-Zero X is possibly the best game in the F-Zero series. So they did do a few things right there.
Yeah, I mean, there's Ocarina of Time, there's Conker's Bad Fur Day, Super Mario 64, the wrestling games from the AKI THQ games, of course, WCW, NWO World Tour, and then later the WWF, now WWE, of course, got that license, WWF WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy. So there are some titles that hold up very well these days, but compared to the previous generations, not so much.
Agreed.
But speaking of downgrades, that brings us to our last question, Derek, that you posed this week, and this one comes courtesy of Shrek 2 Fanboy on X.
Yeah, this was a great topic suggestion. So what he wanted to know was what we consider to be the biggest downgrade in basketball video game history for the 2K and Live series. And what we mean by downgrade is year-over-year releases. So, for example, after 2K17 released, there was 2K18. Would you consider that the biggest downgrade from one year to the next in 2K's history? So I'm going to give my answers really quick, and then we can go to your answers and then the community's responses. So in the NBA Live series, I would say the biggest downgrade was Live 06 to Live 07. And you might say that the Live 06 360 version wasn't that great. And we agree that it wasn't deep, right? It didn't have the depth. It didn't have the freestyle superstars, etc., that NBA Live 06 for PC and PS2 had and whatnot. But I got to tell you, NBA Live 07 for the 360 is that bad.
Yeah.
That game is a major step back from NBA Live 06 gameplay-wise and even visually as well. The frames aren't as sharp. The game lags more, all of that. Like, Live 07 was just the death, in my opinion, of the Live series at that time. It set them back years. They still haven't recovered from NBA Live 07 for the 360.
They could have bounced back from 06. Because that was still solid on the sticks.
That's why I say that.
Look great,
too.
yeah, absolutely. And I agree. It's 06, while it has its issues on 360, is still very solid on the sticks. Live 07, such a big downgrade. That would be my pick as well for the NBA Live series. And I mean, close runner-up is Live 10 to Elite 11 and Live 14. Obviously, that's at least worth a mention. But the damage had already been done big time by then. By Live 07 being that big turning point for the series. And yeah, it is just such a rough game. We have revisited it recently for giggles, mostly for laughs to do, because it's not one that we would play on a whim very often. Hey, they cancelled the PS3 version of that game. Part of that is probably because the PS3 was notoriously difficult to develop for early on, so it's possible they ran into some technical issues. But on top of everything else, the 360 version was just so poorly received that that's probably at least a factor, if not the main reason, certainly one of the main reasons that they cancelled the PS3 version of Live 07.
Oh yeah, the ultimate reason was they probably sat back and realized, crap, our game sucks.
Yeah.
That's probably what it really was. And they were like, we can't let this come out on PS3, because Live 07 for the 360 is absolutely terrible. It is probably the worst basketball video game ever made.
As far as AAA releases, I mean, there's been some shovelware that are barely games, but that is for a big budget release.
Right, but context matters, right?
Yeah, for a big budget release, it is, by scope, the worst basketball game. Yeah, definitely up there, yeah.
Now, I do want to say runner-up, and I'm sorry to the Live 01 Legends. I'm really sorry to Nate. I'm sorry to Roger. But I think Live 2000 to Live 2001 was really, really rough.
Controversial, but
Live
true.
Yeah, Live it is controversial, but Live 2000 is one of the best games in the Live series. Period. The gameplay was incredibly fun. It was sharp. They knew what they were doing at that point with that motion system and with that hardware. And Live 2001, in comparison, was just so rough. Um, and I hate to say it because we can have fun every now and then with NBA Live 2001. In fact, we've posted some gameplay videos of us having a pretty decent time with that game. But I felt like Live 2001 was a major downgrade from Live 2000.
It was. It was. I mean, they went to that new programming language, had to rebuild the game from scratch, lost a lot of the team. That's why the PC version came out later. It's also why they didn't have a PC version of Live 2002. So there was definitely... The series was definitely in flux after Live 2000 for a couple of years. And 2003 was a landmark release, obviously, because of freestyle control, but it was really 2004, 2005, 06 that is that second golden era, as I've said before, that strong second run for Live.
Yeah, 100%. And you can see that in the promotion of the game, right? Like Live 2004 had so much promotion around it. It had all the big NBA names promoting it. You know, you had all the NBA players on the like the intro, etc. You know, saying EA Sports, it's in the game and promoting it. I remember all the commercials back then for NBA Live 2004 and NBA Live 2005. The marketing team killed it with those titles, Andrew. NBA Live was in everybody's living rooms. The series was incredibly popular with those games. And then, of course, you know, after Live 06, they fell off.
But hey, for all its success, the 2K series has also made some blunders, especially in recent years, as we've talked about before. And for me, Derek, my answer would be the example you gave, 2K18 after 2K17. Just the whole vibe of that gaming off, the switch to the new motion system that was clearly not right yet. I've gone over that. I did a video, The Lies of Developer Blogs, that has gone through the lies that were told about the tech of that game and the supposed improvements that they admitted were Band-Aid fixes in the 2K19 previews a year later. So, yeah, 2K18 has to be my answer. It's just, that is the game that I've put down very early and went back to Live 18 and had a great time with Ultimate Team in Live 18, despite some of the issues with that game. And I know Sticky Fingers, for one, is a big fan of 2K18, and you and I, we revisited that and had a bit more fun with that recently, but to me it's still the biggest downgrade, year over year, as you said.
Yeah, it's not a question for me, and I think that a lot of it also has to do with the lack of goodwill that was shown with that game and the increase in microtransactions, right?
Yeah.
That was the turning point for the series. That's where the greed really came in, and that's where the direction of the company kind of, you know, shifted, and it wasn't at all in favor of the consumer. It was it's been very unfortunate, and it's only gotten worse since, but it was just the whole feel of that game. It was the dark arenas, it was the balloons falling into the crowd, it was the unbelievable skating, right after a release of 2K17, which 2K17 had amazing foot planning, right? Realistic foot planning that felt good on the sticks, and, you know, it looked good on the court as well. And I think that, you know, it introduced the side-by-side suction. It introduced a lot of the suction, let's put it that way. It introduced weird rocket layups. It introduced beach ball physics with the basketball. Remember, like, the weird shots that go off the backboard and hit nothing? Like, there's just a lot of weird in NBA 2K18, in my opinion, and a lot of unfortunate happenings that happen on the virtual hardwood and in relation to the monetization aspects of the game. So I would agree. I think that NBA 2K18 was the turning point for the series, and most of the new implementations were not positive.
As I said, the whole vibe of the game just feels off, from the feel of the gameplay to some of the aesthetics, to the My Career Story with Be Fresh, and you're a great prospect that quit basketball to be a DJ, and now you're getting back into it after a streetball tournament gets you into the NBA. I mean, I'm all for a wacky story, and they kind of lend into how wacky it was, but coming off, and Phil Lime actually touches on this as well in his response, just coming off a pretty damn good story, 2K17 with Orange Juice, as silly as that name was, and there was a reason for it that Michael B. Jordan actually brought to the table and helped develop that story with that name. Just again, just the vibe just feeling so off and not as enjoyable as previous years. The switch to the introduction of the neighborhood, I should say, the whole MMORPG aspect that brought in, that's just really gone out of control in years since. It is very much a turning point, and not for the better.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, like you said, we can at times have fun with 2K18 on the sticks, right? Like there's times when the game shines, but it just doesn't have the right vibe.
And it also depends on what you play. I was playing mostly my career and the connected modes at the time, and that was not a great experience. Whereas someone like
I feel bad. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to deal with that.
Absolutely.
You dealt with that for years too, though.
Well, I mean,
and,
it was so much fun.
Parsec.
It was so much fun in 2K17. That's the problem, that it was, again, such a downgrade across the board.
Yeah, it's been good that we were able to find Parsec and connect now on games from all decades and get our basketball gaming in that way. And then also, you've sucked it up and said, I am not going to do the online grind anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to play what I want. And now you've been playing NBA 2K14, NBA 2K6. You're going back and playing NBA Live 09, etc. And honestly, as your friend, that's been really nice to see, because you were not happy.
No,
when we first started talking.
I was in a rut.
You were in a huge rut.
Yeah, no, that's been very refreshing. And even some NCAA Basketball 09, since I've been able to collect those games now for PS3. So
yeah, nice Jordan highlights.
Yes, thank you. Check that out on the NLSC YouTube channel, of course. So let's get to some community responses now. And Stephen, the Live King, of course, says NBA Elite 11/NBA Live 14 from NBA Live 10. Both games were incomplete, although Elite, I feel, offered more than 14.
Yeah, so when you set NBA Elite 11 to traditional controls, I do believe that the gameplay often plays better than NBA Live 14, and that was my response.
Looser,
I agree. Yeah, it's looser. It's not as robotic, right? I think that the graphics are very appealing for that gen of consoles. I think the game looks good. I think that there's way too many line drives in Elite 11. I will say that. The net, when you hit a shot, sometimes the net goes up before the ball actually goes through the hoop. There's some weird feel to the dribbling and whatnot, but at the end of the day, oftentimes NBA Elite 11 is more reactive and better gameplay-wise than Live 14, so I agree with him there.
I will say that the lack of a turbo or sprint button is a pain in the arse, though, either way.
Oh, yeah, it's weird. I mean...
What were they thinking on that one, yeah?
Well, yeah, I mean, they had to be sitting around a table at some point talking about what they were going to include in the game. How did nobody bring up a sprint button?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me.
And next up we have Bucky T once again, says, for NBA 2K, definitely 2K18 after a great game in 2K17, for NBA Live, 14 after a well-received NBA Live 10. And I would agree, once again, on both counts.
I'll say again, Bucky T, it always seems like he shares a brain with us.
Yeah.
Very similar viewpoints when it comes to both the NBA 2K and NBA Live series.
And I mentioned Phil Lime 2002 before, says yes, 2K18 after 2K17, the beginning of microtransactions becoming more dominant, gameplay flaws, my team with increasingly more unrealistic cards, my career story compared to Orange Juice. I respectfully call this the transition for the ages, but for the wrong reason. And yeah, that sums up my opinion too.
There's a lot of people who agree with us about NBA 2K18 being the start of the frustration with the series. And every time somebody puts out a post on social media that says, what's the worst 2K of all time? 2K18 is widely named, right? It's most commonly mentioned in all of those social media posts, and there's a reason for that.
And also Shady Mike Gaming says, don't got to be basketball sim history. NBA 2K17 to 2K18 is the biggest year-to-year downgrade in gaming history. Caught lightning in a bottle with 2K20, but if we're being honest, 2K fell off and never recovered. And certainly wherever you see the turning point, 2K18 being a big one, you and I, we don't feel that 2K is where it should be at this point. And look, I will say that 2K21, last week we talked about 2K14, as much as we love it, missing those features, some of those key features that the PC version had, and having to bring them back in 2K15. One thing they did get right with 2K21 was making sure that it was fully featured at launch.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, there's been some rough launches in 2K's past that had me, questioning if I would even spend any time on the game. I remember NBA 2K16's launch was absolutely terrible for the PC. You had players shooting jump shots looking off to the side. The game crawled. It was laggy. It was like, I was really upset about NBA 2K16, the way it was released like in week one. But they patched it, and these were actually effective patches that improved the gameplay. And then once I started, messing with the sliders and everything, I was able to make NBA 2K16 a very fun game. But there's definitely been some rough launches. And again, it's like what we mentioned on prior shows, developers leaning on patches, Andrew, right?
Yeah.
Rushing release, etc. It's not a good look.
And heading over to Facebook for a few more responses now. Royce, shout out to Royce as always, says Live 07 after 06 and no follow-up to NBA Live 10, which again, yeah, 100% agree with that. Live 07, such a rough release, and Live 10, all that momentum squandered.
Is it sad that I light up when somebody else mentions how terrible NBA Live 07 for the 360 is? It's because
vindication, right?
Well, I'm proud of my fellow gamer whenever I hear it.
Yeah.
Because it's like they see the terribleness. They see how that was so destructive to the series. And in my opinion, those are good virtual basketball minds, Andrew. So Royce has a good virtual basketball mind.
And Royce also mentions 2K15 or 16 after the greatness that ran from 2K10 to 2K14. Actually, 2K6 was fire too. So, that does differ a bit there. I do like 2K15 and 16 a lot more. But 2K14 I am still hooked on, at least the next-gen version right now.
I can still see where he's coming from, though, because I do think that the vibe was a little bit different, right? Like,
True.
When they went to 2K15 for PS4 gen, all of a sudden all the stadiums were dark, right? The floors were dark. The crowd was dark. All of that. It just didn't have the same vibe of the releases from 2K10 to 2K14. Personally, though, when I go back and I play NBA 2K15, I really enjoy the gameplay. I think that's very strong. I think that it's very similar to NBA 2K14 Xbox One, and it even adds some enhancements like size-ups, like size-up dribbles, which NBA 2K14 for Xbox One did not have. But I do see where he's coming from.
And Ace also says 2K15 Next Gen after 2K14 Next Gen. So again, that vibe we've talked about. And also, of course, my career took a very interesting approach that year by having a start halfway through the season, trying to latch on with 10-day contracts rather than starting at the beginning of the year and playing a full rookie season as before. And there's obviously more focus on my team as well. It wasn't completely out of control yet, but you can see the seeds being planted for the future of the microtransaction-driven modes.
In this NLSC podcast, the lesson here is that vibes matter.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we want more good vibes.
Yes.
In our basketball video games. That's the lesson here.
Daywood says NBA 2K13 after 2K12 for me. And yeah, that's kind of a reverse for me. I do like 2K12, but 2K13 bringing in the right stick dribbling was such a big factor in me enjoying that game more. But of course you do have issues like not being able to block dunks. That is a big one. And that made the gameplay cheesy at times.
My guess is that he also loved NBA 2K11, right? Because the gameplay on NBA 2K12 is so similar, and they were still paying respect to the legends, and that game was still super deep. Maybe he wasn't a fan of, moving on to right stick controls. Maybe he wasn't a fan of the lack of defensive ability in NBA 2K13, like not being able to block dunks, etc. Maybe he felt the series was more unique without the right stick dribbling, right?
Sure.
There are some people out there that like the ISO motion. So who knows? But all I know is that I enjoyed 2K13. I love that game.
And you thought that your comments about NBA Live 2001 were controversial, Derek. Let's end on a very controversial note here with Gilbert saying NBA Live 06 after NBA Live 2005.
He might be talking about the 360 version, though, because if he moved on to the 360 version of Live 06, it was the first year they had that next-gen version, after playing NBA Live 2005 for the PS2, I could see where he's coming from, from a depth perspective. A lot of people would also consider that the gameplay being stronger on NBA Live 2005 for PS2, etc. Or, Andrew, he could not like the Freestyle Superstars.
This is true.
Not everybody was a fan of it. So if he's talking about PS2 to PS2 or PC to PC comparisons, then maybe that broke the game for him. I can see for some people it would be game breaking. So maybe that's it.
I can see that. And I know there are people who do prefer 2005 to 06. For me, 06 just cleaned up those issues with the fast breaks and cutting logic and things like that, and enhancing Dynasty with staff hiring and a few other enhancements across the board. I do like Freestyle Superstars. I like what it brought to the board, so I would respectfully disagree with that. But at the same time, yes, I can see where you're coming from with it.
Exactly.
So thank you to everybody who responded to all of our questions. Love having that community interaction and being able to share those opinions and talk about them on the show, because we obviously have very strong opinions about basketball gaming, Derek, but so does the community, and I love that we have that conversation with them and that the conversation continues in the forum, on social media, and our Discord.
So many responses. I feel like we're lucky, right? There's a lot of people in the community still passionate about basketball gaming. They want their voices to be heard. They love, having the conversations about the classics and, talking good and bad about the newest releases and everything. Yeah, shout out to the community.
So by all means, keep that conversation going, because we love it and we love basketball games. And once again, we're always going to advocate for free mods and good vibes.
Good vibes. That's what this NLC podcast is all about. And the NLSC in general, Andrew. Good vibes.
Absolutely. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week and every week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us and, of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do to basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.